Despite knowing the journey and where it leads, I embrace it, and I welcome every moment of it. Dr. Louise Banks from the movie Arrival. Hi, I'm Frank Speidel, a retired emergency physician and recovering hospital administrator. And welcome to The Doctor Is In. In this show, with the help of guests, we explore healthcare in the U.S. and its interface with our society. Now, I am neither an infectious disease specialist, nor an epidemiologist, nor a public health official. For guidance and healthcare decisions, I recommend you consult your primary physician. Caring is wired gene deep in us as a species, and caring is challenging. To help us with insights into caring and its burdens, I am honored to have Mr. Rick Anthony. Mr. Anthony is a wide-ranging, insightful, never ceasing to invite us all forward and change things for the better. Rick, welcome to The Doctor Is In. What got you interested in family caregiving?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're more than welcome.
As I think you know, several years ago, I became interested in caregiving more as a business opportunity. I invested in an early stage venture that had technology that was created to provide support and service to caregivers, that is, to make services that they need or the care-dependent adult needs, transportation, food, medication management, and so on, to bring all of that together in one single contact place. That was the idea, the concept. And so I followed my money and was doing some of my own research into caregiving, and I became aware that just how pervasive it is. But I was looking at it more as a business opportunity. Big market, big opportunity, underserved for the most part. Then my wife became ill. She had been ill for a while, but she became progressively ill and became more dependent on me and others. And so what became a research project for me became a real reality. I found myself, not by surprise, but it almost happened imperceptibly. All of a sudden, I was a caregiver, a 24/7 caregiver. And as much as I had done all the research, as much as I had done all the reading and made presentations and so on to prospective investors, as you know, unless you live it, you really don't know it.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen, Rick. That's well phrased. You have to live it to know it. I don't recall hearing much about caregiving. What's changed?
Well, the sheer numbers, for one thing. There are today over 53 million unpaid family caregivers in this country, up from 43 million just about 6 years ago. And so it seems to be growing exponentially, not surprisingly. Population is aging, as you very well know, and is living with one or more morbidities, as you know. And so the need for, and therefore the opportunity for innovation and so on, to improve the quality of life, the need is expanding. And wherever there's an expanding need, it's going to catch the attention of investors, innovators, technologists who see both a need and an opportunity. I think the other thing is COVID. COVID helped to bring it to light because there were more and more people who were home, and therefore they were spending more of their time providing assistance for people who were ill, as related to COVID or not. Nonetheless, they were at home. And the other thing is innovation. As I said, not just in the area of caregiving, but healthcare generally, as you know better than anybody. But there was more and more innovation, more technology being directed at home care, the broader subject, and within that, caregiving for particularly dementia and Alzheimer's, as those numbers continue to escalate. So I think it was both a need and an opportunity. The sheer numbers, COVID helped to bring it to the fore, particularly in the political realm, because more and more politicians were paying attention to it because they were being pressured to pay more attention to it. And the other aspect of it is the difficulty of getting care. And so politicians were hearing about that as well because of bureaucracy, because of regulations and so on. And finally, we are waking up as a country to the reality that we're on the brink of a caregiving crisis in this country. There aren't enough, nor will there be enough caregivers.
Absolutely. I appreciate what you're saying. And there is a tendency, my little superficial observation, is that the caregiver doesn't know when to say, I can't go on any further. They push, and that's to their credit. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about support for employees who are caregivers. Tell me about that.
That's an interesting phenomenon. And again, as part of the venture that I had invested in, we expected to ride that wave as more and more employers, not necessarily for altruistic reasons, but for economic and self-perpetuating reasons, were becoming more aware of caregivers among the employee population. These are not my statistics. They are the statistics that are generally available. It's estimated that 15% of any employee population has employees who are full or part-time caregivers. That means that those employees are leaving the workforce and putting in 20 to 25 hours a week as caregivers. Furthermore, 1 out of 5 of us are or will become a caregiver in our lifetime. So it's all around us now, and employers' initial response, and as an HR consultant and so on, I can appreciate this. Their first response was, well, we'll give them more paid time off. That should help them. Again, it was well-intentioned, but they didn't understand, and for the most part, they still don't understand that more time off is nice. It takes the stigma away from the employee who has to take more time off, especially when they get a crisis call and they have to leave work right away to get home to take care of somebody. And so for economic reasons, employers are waking up to the fact that they have to provide support. Otherwise, with a shrinking workforce to begin with, and to retain the good workers, they're going to have to provide some kind of support. The article you read is the one I think I saw as well, about peer groups that are now being developed within the workforce, not necessarily sponsored by the employer, but just employees getting together and commiserating and sharing stories and trying to be of help to one another, and other employees who are joining to be supportive of their fellow workers. It's a marvelous thing. It's almost spontaneous the way it's growing up. However, on the flip side of that, going back to the economic need and opportunity, there are companies like Wellthy. I always had a hard time. WELLTHY. That was formed not too many years ago by a man and wife. They've done phenomenally well by providing programs and services to employers as an employee benefit. Not a voluntary benefit, but an employee benefit, as good as any of the others that are available to employees. They just received another $28.5 million of investment infusion. So somebody sees something is going on good. There are other companies like that that are coming in now because the need is so great. And employers, particularly large employers, are finally beginning to understand that just giving them more paid time off isn't enough. They need more support. Going back to something you said, they're burned out, therefore they're a risk to themselves and to everybody else around them. Their insurance rates are going to be affected. Their benefits costs are going to be affected if they don't do something to help employees who really don't have an option. They have to take care of a care-dependent adult. And my focus has been on adults, not child care, but adult care.
Let me amplify one of the observations you just had, Rick. You mentioned about spontaneous co-workers spontaneously helping out and making everything that they could do to help a person providing care. That was exactly what I experienced with my mother in her terminal illness. Now, it was in some ways, since I was working in healthcare in the emergency department, I think people were predisposed to help out. But the number of unsolicited times when people helped out massively in providing care for my mom in those last days, I can never lose sight of that. You get cynical, you think the world doesn't care. No, there's a lot of, like I said, caring is gene wired deep in us as a species.
You're absolutely right.
And it's
in spite of all the headlines,
yes,
we're still good people.
Yes, we are. We are very much so. So, when did you decide to produce and host a TV series on caregiving? I can see why, but tell me a little bit more about the kinetics of that.
The impetus was really the death of my wife after a long illness, and when she was, also, in addition to her other physical problems, she was diagnosed with vascular dementia. And I began to see the signs of that, and it was getting progressively worse. So I thank God for taking her home and sparing her the ravages of dementia. As you know, they're horrible. It's a terrible, terrible disease. When she died, I've got to do something to get the word out. Mm-hmm. And I'm blessed with the opportunity here at the studio and whatever other gifts God has given me to try to get information to people. And so I decided to do a 12-part series called Caregiving Assist. And we're now doing our 9th episode of the 12. And there will be a sequel to that, 6 parts on grieving, a process with which I am now well-versed. Because Marlene passed away about 7 months ago. So that was really the impetus, and it's really dedicated to Marlene.
It speaks to the relationship you have with Marlene, that this is in some ways a mission changer for you.
You're right. It is a mission. It is a mission, but in her name. Because I step back, and I guess that happens to all of us. Okay, now what? After almost 65 years of marriage with somebody I've known since she was 14, only 16 years of my life that I didn't know her and love her. What do I do now? And I prayed on it and decided that whatever I do was going to be in memory of Marlene, not just this, but other things that I hope to do. In memory of Marlene, and so whatever is left of me will be spent in good purpose.
I cannot say enough to emphasize that. I'm touched by this is the perspective we all should have. Are there training programs for unpaid family caregivers?
I was surprised to learn that first of all, there aren't many, and those that do exist are relatively new. Most of the training programs that are available are online. Most of them are for paid caregivers, that is, those who want to become certified so that they can, through an agency or independently, be available and receive compensation for the services they provide. But there was nothing that I came upon until recently that was intended specifically for unpaid family caregivers. And then I learned I knew about Surrey Services for a long time. They're based in Devon. I didn't know about a program that is called Surrey Academy. It was specifically designed to provide training, both online as well as in-person, hands-on training for both unpaid family caregivers as well as those who are interested in developing a career in caregiving. So they have a 2-track program that is, as I said, online, but unlike most others, is also hands-on. They'll go into a home in my case, for example, if I had known it existed, they would have come to my home, done an inventory, decided what the risk factors were, helped me to deal with those initial risk factors, and then coached me along the way. It would have been enormously helpful, largely because, I think I'm a fairly intelligent person.
Yes.
But Frank, you don't know what you don't know until you're in the trenches. And I was doing things, and because it's so difficult to have access to healthcare these days, especially during the pandemic, that was impossible. But the worst part for me was dispensing Marlene's medications, and she was on a lot of them, AM and PF. And I was frightened to death. Part of her problem was blood pressure, and so as you know, give her too much, you can over-medicate, and you get the reverse problem. It drops like a rock, which it did. I was calling doctors at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. I need help. Give me some guidance. I can't put my wife at risk because I don't know what to do. Those are the kinds of things that I wished I'd had more education, more support to make those kinds of, in my opinion, potentially life-threatening decisions that I was not qualified to make. Just following the instructions on a bottle of pills, that's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate what
there is now Surrey Academy, and interesting, they tell me that their problem is there are people who are interested in the program that just can't take the time off to even sit at a screen for an online program, or they're too exhausted at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes, you may have the hours are open, nothing is tasked for those hours, but the energy level you need to do, we tend to forget how much, half of our blood flow goes to our brain, and that's because it cooks a lot of energy when we think and when we solve problems, and that is tiring. And at the end of the day, if you have been solving the world, it's hard to get that screen time and have it meaningful.
Yeah.
I agree with that 1,000%. When you were talking about Surrey, I was impressed that it sounded a lot like the good hospice programs. The good hospice programs were the people who are experts in knowing for care for people that need it. Do the inventory in your home, and not just of the home physically, but of the resources that the family has to approach the care and resolution. I would speculate about caregiving, that maybe it should be broadened the concept a bit. I have a great dear friend who lost her son as a young 21-year-old to drug overdose. And the families who are trying to help people through this disease need all the support we can give them. Does Surrey have anything like that for?
They have a home care program. I don't know whether or not it includes hospice, as does Mainline, as you know. Mainline's home care program is just at home care as well as hospice care, as well as Penn has the same service. I don't know about Surrey. As you know, there are standalone hospice programs as well. I saw a number. It was amazing how many of these have popped up. The number was something like 6,000 hospice care programs in the country now, and growing, for all the reasons we were talking about before. Let me mention something, though. When Marlene was in the hospital the last time, and they said, we've done all we can. Her body is not self-regulating, and you would know better what that means. We can't do anything more for her. You should take her home, give her palliative care, or hospice care. And my children and I struggled with what's best for her. She's dying. We know she's dying. That's not going to change. So do we take her home and give her palliative, which, as you know, is intended to help improve the situation and maybe even recovery, whereas hospice can go on for a long time, but it is really intended, correct me if I'm wrong, to help the patient through the process of final death. That was a tough decision as a caregiver, because agreeing to hospice was also accepting the finality of Marlene's life. It was over. And that was tough. That was really tough. Even though it was best for her, we knew it would be best for her, rather than have her suffer needlessly. But that's the decision we finally made, hospice. And to your point, the service we had, they came to the house. They set up everything for the bed and so on, and the oxygen and everything else. They sent their aides in. They brought in a religious advisor, I'm not sure, a spiritual advisor, I guess, to talk to us about that aspect of it. They were very comforting, very supportive. It was good to have them there at the time.
Wow. Where do I start? This is great. My question about Surrey and hospice was sort of alluding to the fact of also supporting the caregivers.
Yes.
And I've also seen that families that have a family member that's suffering from addiction, those people need support too.
Yes.
That's a huge challenge, and I was wondering if Surrey had brought in their concept of that. But you then talked about something, Rick. This is excellent. We encourage patients, whenever we see them and they're functional, to speak with their family while they still have their capacity, where they have insight, judgment,
Right.
and are oriented, to declare how they want their inevitable final days to be. To the living will concept.
Yeah.
This is what I want done. This is how I want to depart the pattern. There's a quirky quote I put at the start of this from a movie called Arrival, where the main character, Dr. Banks, says, knowing what's going to happen, I still want it, and I accept it and celebrate it, this kind of concept. We're all going to have to make these decisions for ourselves.
Yes.
And somebody said a long time ago that life begins when you understand that you're going to die,
Yeah.
and that it's not something that can be negotiated.
In our case, thank heaven, we had either the foresight or the good counsel from others. We had the living will, we had the power of attorney in place. Marlene had made it clear rather that she wanted no resuscitation. She was adamant about that. Particularly, she was afraid of a stroke as well. And so she told me more than once, if I have a stroke, please do not try to save me. I don't want to live like that. So to the point, all of those decisions had been made, difficult as they were, and were in place so that when we were asked, what are your wishes, what are her wishes, that we were able to give them a clear answer.
Did you ever get a sense, you've done the deep dive, you've really become involved, Rick, and God bless you for this. Do you ever get the sense that most people want to die at home?
I don't think there's any question about that, and the data show it as well. Most people would prefer to die at home. Now, excuse me, allergies are killing me. And again, you know better than I. There are so many variables. Who's at home, if anybody, to take care of them, or cares enough to take care of them? Do they have the physical facilities, privacy, those kinds of things, a bedroom or some space that can be dedicated to keeping them at home? So many things go into that. But again, insurance companies and others who control our health care, and particularly the end of our lives, are waking up to that factor and providing more financial support. Let me add one other quick footnote. Excuse me, I'm doing this series and touching on my own experience and talking to other people and their experiences. One of the worst parts of caregiving for me, and I've talked to other people about it as well, is dealing with insurance companies. Before, during, and after death, they are... we had long-term care. We thought we were smart, and we bought long-term care insurance. I was going through hoops to try to get those people to give me what they needed, because they kept changing what they needed. And then they'd be going back to all the providers and collecting all the data, and I was receiving these nonsense letters all the time.
Yes.
You don't quite qualify, but we're still doing the research. It was horrible.
Yes.
It was horrible, and it affected me to the point where I was angry when I shouldn't have been angry. I should have been focusing on Marlene and what she needed, not what the hell an insurance company needed. Well, I paid all those premiums all those years, and I'll make this accusation. Those insurance companies, the long-term care insurance companies, in my opinion, because they never really learned how to reserve for the benefits they have to pay, do everything in their power not to have to pay the benefit.
I know nothing about the microeconomics of the long-term care insurance companies, but I speculate the following because I've seen it throughout other industries. Your focus is not on a sustaining ongoing company. You are going to be evaluated by what did this next quarter look like, and the quarter after that.
Right.
That will decide your retention. It will decide your bonuses. And there are so many ways. I'm looking at a college right now that is doing something like this, where it is the short term trumps the long term. And it's a value system that we have incorporated in many industries where it's quarter to quarter. What did you do this quarter?
Frank, if I may, you touched on something else. I'd like to double back, and that's self-care. So many people, my children, my physicians, people at the hospitals, Mr. Anthony, make sure you take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Make sure, because she needs you, and if you're not around, she's going to be in trouble. I didn't really understand what that meant. Did it mean sleep? Sure. Did it mean eat regularly? Sure. But it also meant getting away from it.
Exactly.
Reprieve.
You're not a bad person. You're preserving the best asset.
I appreciate that. And so as part of the series, Caregiver Assist, I interviewed Jane Hamilton, who, among other things, she's a psychiatric nurse, she's an RN, she's terrific. But she's written a book for caregivers on self-care. And it's great, all kinds of exercises and record keeping and so on, to try to keep your head on straight and to keep your emotions under control. I highly recommend it. It's called The Caregiver's Guide to Self-Care.
Here it is, The Caregiver's Guide to Self-Care. I'm not pushing Jane's book, but it sounds like there's information that can help us there.
Absolutely.
What are some examples of innovations that are helpful to caregivers and to care-dependent adults?
The list goes on. Many of the innovations, again, as you know better than I, are really intended for the broader healthcare, home care market. and so medication notices, medication management, lift devices to get people in and out of bed, sensing devices for people who fall, monitoring devices, sensors at the foot of the bed, in the bed, and so on, so you know when the person is moved. Others, I hate the word surveillance, but monitoring systems, all of that stuff has been very, very helpful in the area of home care. We didn't use any of it, didn't need to, thank God. Well, again, because I was 24/7. Marlene didn't go anywhere, do anything unless I was there. In spite of that, she fell, broke her nose and put a gash in her head.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Christmas Eve.
It's going to happen.
So my hope is that AI, with all of the angst we all have about AI out of control, will bring even more innovation. And I see the day when there will be robotic caregivers who have the emotional intelligence and have the ability to anticipate what care-dependent people need. And I think the day is coming when many of the tasks that caregivers now provide will be provided by robotics in the home.
It's something to look forward to. And Mr. Anthony, I am honored to call you friend. You have the values and the sensitivities that our shabby world needs so much more of. I am very touched. You have provided substantial insights, and I thank you. And out there, thank you very much for spending some time and watching The Doctor Is In.